Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Ask the Knights Live of 2021. It's already started off as a really interesting year. So, without any more on that, let me bring in our guests because we are raring to go and wanting to give you a little bit of entertainment so we can take our minds off of some of the goofiness that's been going on. So, without further ado, gentlemen, it's great to
So
have you
we replace
here on the
goofiness
show.
with goofiness.
Yes.
Yeah, I wait a minute. He did say that, didn't he? So, I don't think
Yeah.
so.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Decorum. What does that word mean?
I
What?
don't know.
What? No, we got none of that. We got none of that here. Gentlemen, if you would please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you got yourself or how long you've been in the SCA.
Go ahead, Timur.
I was gonna say, why don't you go first? You're great. You usually do anyway.
No, after you.
It's-
No, please.
it's a great song.
So it started like this. Back in 1987, when Sean first started, he was what were you? 14, 15 back then?
I'll get to my origin story in a minute.
Oh,
There,
I thought I was going to give your origin story. You give my origin story. So
I was knighted by 87.
you're not about 87. Okay, yeah. There's a comic strip about that, I think.
How about you do your story and I'll do my story? I think I got
Okay.
because
All right,
I've been
so-
around for all of your story.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, so the good, the bad, and the very entertaining. All right. So,
Likewise.
Yeah, we talk about that too. So for me personally, I got started back in '89 as part of a fringe group, and started down in Provo, Utah, the now canton of
Province.
province of Arrows Flight. Yeah, it was canton back then, and that's how I originally got started with it. And it was fun, as you know. I've always been involved in martial arts in one way or another since I was 5, and so it was, I talked to my sensei at the time, and I asked him about weapon structure, and he's like, "Well, we don't have the safety gear for what you're looking for. However, I know this crackpot," and he was correct. He was a crackpot, loved him to death. God bless his soul. And so he introduced me to this local dude, and the guy's like, "Here, why don't you try this on?" He put a thing on my head and hit me really hard, and I'm like, "Wow, this is fun. You get to hit people like this," and that's how it kind of started. I was pretty much a fringe player for a while. I ended up becoming squire to one of the local viscounts, Shannon Irontree, and that's a good relationship. I learned a lot of really good basics from Shannon, but Shannon got really busy with real life, and my life was turning into another direction. So he and I separated ways, which was really good for both of us. So I took about a year off, and just kind of finding myself, figure out what niche I wanted to go into the SCA, which direction I wanted to go to. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but not necessarily the way to execute it. Then this dude comes back from the Navy, and I'm like, wow, he seems kind of interesting, and we got a chance to talk. And then he wanted this principality list. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to bother him for about a year. And then shortly after he stepped down from his time as Prince of Artemisia, second to last Prince of Artemisia, he and I began this conversation about knighthood and direction. And a really cool thing is that when we weren't friends before this, we knew each other, but like I said, he literally was fresh off the boat. And for me, I was just this little guy that really had an idea but no direction to go. And that was the beginning of a really intense and very cool friendship for Sean and I. And ever since then, it's been really good. It's been a lot of blasts. Sean's given me the opportunity to learn, teach, and be taught by a bunch of people, such as Basil, Brian, and a plethora of individuals. It wasn't this is my way, this is the only direction. It was like, hey, Tim, go talk to this guy. They might have something for you. Go talk to that guy. They might have something for you. Or I need you to go to this event and represent us. Where's this at? North Shield. What's North Shield? Okay, well, fine, cool.
Guess where you're going.
Yeah, he literally, like, I showed up at his house one day. He's like, "Hey, Timur, guess where you're going?" I'm like, "Whoa, I guess we're going to North Shield, yay!" And it was really actually pretty intense. It was fun. It was a blast. the Northeast are amazing. But yeah, and that's a very very short version of how I got started SDA, and also how my friendship with Sean started going with that. I did the E, but there's other cool stuff to talk about. Okay, your turn.
Well, Logan, you and I have been around the SEA for a long time. I've been to a lot of different places, and you know that, like, you and I have forgotten more people than most people have ever met, right?
I think I was just called old.
That's what he said.
And there's,
but yes.
And there's people that you met briefly, like, and even like long-term friendships that you have. You know that there's a lot of people that, like, I can't remember when I met so and so, but they're part of my life and that sort of thing. Well, Timmur happens to be somebody that I remember very clearly the day that I met him, the moment I met him. It was one of our would have been the spring of '95, I guess, and went to the local fighter practice. First day it was outdoors after being in the wintertime. Timmur was out there with his knight at the time, Shannon. Shannon introduced me to him, and Squire. I mean, kind of, somewhat raggedy looking armor, as you can expect from a guy making his way up the chain there and all. And I was, only marginally better, I can imagine. But I remember when I met Timmur, and I introduced myself as Sean, because that's typically how I introduce myself, because if you need to know that I'm Duke Sean or that Sean, you'll find out soon enough. So I said, Sean. I'm like, hey, I'm Sean. Nice to meet you. And Timmur looked down at me, around my waist, noticed the white belt, and he said, Sir Sean. I was like, yep. And it was just the fact that even as new as he was to the SCA at that time, that he took time to notice and to mention, because for us as knights, a lot of times it's, we often downplay our status, especially as dukes, honestly, because we don't need to go around going, I'm Duke Sean, perhaps you've heard of me. And so we really don't do that sort of thing, and so we kind of downplay it sometimes. And to have somebody that new, like, just, it was a very simple recognition, right? Most people would not notice it, but it was something I've remembered for the 20 plus years now that I've known Timmur, that it was like, that was part of his game, right? And it was always very striking to me. And then, shortly thereafter, I had a reign as he said, the second to last Prince of Artemisia. And at the time, Timmur had told me that he'd waited for me to step down before he talked to me about being a student, because he didn't want to be that guy, TM. It was like, oh, this guy's the prince. Let me get in good with the prince, and didn't want to be that guy. So he waited an entire week. Let's see, I stepped down on Saturday. He showed up to practice on Wednesday, and that's pretty much where we decided to do that. So that's kind of how I met Timmur. The rest of my story is, I found the SCA when I was 12 years old, 1982. My parents were doing this thing, and had been doing this thing for 9 months or so. I knew nothing about it. We were driving by the park because we were going to this thing that my parents did that I didn't know anything about. As we're driving by, right as we're driving on the main street going into the park, I see all these guys in armor, and I'm like, I don't know what you guys are planning on doing, but I'm doing that. And so it turns out that's where we were going, and I loved it it was love at first sight, most definitely. I knew instantly that this is something I wanted to do, and like, I've never been passionate about something like that from the get-go, like I have been with SCA combat. I saw it, I fell in love with it immediately, knew I was going to do it for a long time to come. And so 30, 40, almost 40 years, yeah, that's 39 years later. still here. So that's the short version of my SCA origin story.
It's awesome. Like I feel you when you say it was love at first sight, because yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So funny how small the world is, and not just the world, but especially the SCA world. I knew Shannon Irontree when he was living in Vegas. He was actually part of a group that I was part of in Las Vegas at the time before he moved away. So small world, huh?
Very, very small world. And yeah, we can probably talk more about that later. But yeah, definitely a small
Yes,
world.
yes.
Yeah.
I would say
A
that
lot.
he's a very smart man. He taught me a lot of stuff.
He does know his basics really well, and he's really willing to share that knowledge. And for that, I'm really grateful for. I mean, the mess that Sean inherited was a different type of mess, but at least most of the 101s were there. The PLQs he's still working on, and
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah,
no,
Timmur came to me with a pretty solid foundation. I just kind of had to focus it and just kind of direct it a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, once again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. But even more so, I think the three of us need to thank somebody for bringing us together this evening. I think you guys know who it is. It's Her Highness of the Miss, Princess.
Yeah.
She worked very hard to get this show together, and she was very excited to do so. And I'm so glad that she did. She's the one that made the suggestion to have the both of you on and have you on at the same time. So I just wanted to thank her for that. We'll see if I'll thank her, at the end of the show.
Love you, honey.
Yeah, we'll see if she tries to disavow all knowledge of this request.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why he said it that way. That way, you can just, the bus throw under there. So no matter what happens, we all have our skatebook now.
Abandoned gig. Abandoned gig.
And again, no.
Absolutely. All right, so I have to pull up my magic question tablet here.
All right.
So I'm gonna ask straight up. This is supposed to be a fun show because the first show of the new year, and this is what we need. So my first question for you guys is: are you a war knight, or are you a tournament knight?
Tourney night.
Done.
Slacker night.
I have more thoughts on
Slacker
that, but
night.
the short answer is tourney night.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the next question is why?
Go ahead, Timur.
All right. So, I'd have to say, honestly, for me, I'm pretty much split 50.
Honey, can you let the dog?
I really, really love the fight, period, and the sentence. Now, the war scenarios are great. They are intense. They're wonderful when you get a few thousand people or you get 30 people together. It's really great. However, the tourney side of it, and I think this is where Sean's going to go with it too. For me, that's where, I mean, if I distract someone and then some spear guy manages to get a few tags, that's awesome. But with the tourney, it's just me and the other individual that's out there. And actually, oh crap, I gotta remember that. That's the tourney nights where I'm going to be at, and that's because the world melts away. When it's just me and someone else on the field, it does this weird thing that happens for me when everything else just evaporates, and it's just me, this other person, and they're going to try to put me down. I'm going to try to put them down, and afterwards we can probably have a couple of beers and talk about it and have some fun at it. But right there and then, the whole world melts away, and I love it. That the intensity of the dance, that's just right there, no matter what happens. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say tourney night. All right, Sean.
So I mean, tournament fighting at the first practice I went to, was the first thing I saw. So I mean, there's kind of that. I didn't go to Australia as my first event or go to Pensacola as my first event and see all the war stuff and say I want to be part of that. So that might play into it. But this is a question that comes up a lot regarding knighthood in general, is the place the place of each in knighthood, and the idea of a melee knight or a war knight. Knighthood is an individual accomplishment, and you need to distinguish yourself as an individual to be a knight. And the best place you can do that is on the tourney field. At the same time, knighthood requires leadership, and the only place you can demonstrate leadership is on the melee field. So they're kind of two sides of the same coin, right? There, you really can't have one without the other, because you need to develop those leadership skills. I talk a lot about what I refer to as the evolution of our sport. In the training that I do and trying to change the way that we teach our sport, I'm trying to, I'm trying to contribute to the evolution of our sport, right? Where the fighting that we're doing now should be better than it was 53 years ago when the SCA started in the first place, right? And so, to a increasingly lesser degree, it should be better than it was 30 years ago. It should be better than it was 20 years ago, and so on. And part of that evolution is like we're making all of that sport better, and we need to do the same with melee tactics as well. So, for the people that enjoy melee combat in ways that I don't, or in ways in which, or more than I do melee. It's not that I don't like melee. It's just I like tourney better. And now, as I kind of become more of a trainer in my fighting career, I can do more good for the SCA as a whole on the pickup field, training future generations of fighters than I can in helping my army win Australia. So I'm going to do a couple of battles. I'm going to do the battles that are interesting to me, that I want to be a part of. But it's not my gig. It's not my passion. It's not the thing that really drives me. It says, I can't, when I think about going to Australia, it's Outlands Prize Tourney, Rose's Cancer Tourney, and 3 days of pickups. That's what drives me. That's what gets me there. And I'll do the war scenarios that are interesting to me. But being able to help other people, I think is a greater benefit to the society.
Well said. Well, thank you for those answers, gents. We have, sorry, I have to remind our lovely audience, because, it's been a couple weeks since we've been live on the air, to make sure. I see a few questions in the comments already, but make sure you're getting those questions in, because I'm lazy. And the second half of the show, I leave the questions up to you guys. So if I don't have questions to pick and choose from, then we're just going to stand here or sit here and stare at each other. That's not true.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, that's so
not. Please get those questions in there. I already saw a couple of good ones that I can't wait to ask. But before we get there, I get to ask a couple of my own favorite questions. So, gents, the whole reason I started the show is because of the stupid situation that we're in, this pandemic. It's a thing that's completely out of our control. And some of the best advice I've ever gotten was, you don't strive to be knighted, you strive to be knightly. And then others will recognize that, or they won't, but it doesn't matter, because you'll be thought of as being a knight. If you are on the path, though, you want to continue that way. And these last few months have really stolen a lot of what it is for unbelts to be doing well. You know what I mean? We can't get together with the folks who have gotten the accolade. We can't get very much direct instruction, hands-on instruction. We got tons of YouTube videos and stuff like that. But I guess the question is what do you say to those that feel that like their dream might be draining away due to the pandemic? Like, how do you help them? Yeah, how do you help them deal with that?
Yeah, you take this one first, and I'll follow up.
So, yeah, there's a lot going on. this is a really hard time. It's hard for a number of reasons for the unbelted community, um, for the martial community, the SCA. In order, I mean, we have a fairly specific venue in which we can demonstrate our prowess. Um, and that venue doesn't exist for us right now. If you look at some of the stuff that's going on in the arts and sciences community, our kingdom this last May did our Kingdom Arts and Sciences competition totally virtual, totally online, and it was brilliant. It worked out really, really well. People were able to take pictures, and it's not the same as being able to put your hands on stuff and say, "What are you doing with this?" and like tell me about your thing. But but on the same token, as a judge for that competition, I was able to take a week to kind of go over the pictures and go through the research and the documentation to find out what's going on. So I think there are some parts about the SCA that I think lend naturally to this sort of thing. Not that it's better, because let me be very clear that online SCA is not better in any respect than live events. I would much rather be at events, but I want to do so safely. So I want to be clear about that. But fighting is one of those things that it's a skill that is hard for us to maintain if we don't have an opportunity to do it on a daily basis. If you're an artist and your geek is doing hand sewing stuff, I mean, I can put on a movie and I can do hand sewing, right? I don't need another person to do that. I don't need a venue to do that. And so it's really hard for unbelted fighters right now to demonstrate what they have learned during the pandemic. The flip side of that is, I don't know that there's been a better time for somebody to learn fighting from the ground up. There are tons of resources available out there now that didn't exist before the pandemic, or existed in kind of pockets. But if you are taking, if you've been able to do Pell work for nearly a year now, and do Pell work drills and footwork drills, and like, there's so many things that you could be doing during this time that I think actually establish a foundation far better than actual fighting does. And there's some like legitimate psychological reasons for why that is. But basically kind of has to do with the fact that people don't want to do the boring, tedious Pell work stuff. They want to get in armor and hit people with sticks. And that's the hook. That's what gets us in, and people don't want to do that work. Well, if you can't do that on a regular basis, then there's this other work that you can be doing. And if you're doing that work, there's a lot that you can be learning right now. And so it's kind of, there's kind of two sides to it, and it's really hard to do the Pell work and the footwork drills without actually putting it into practice and knowing whether or not you're doing the right stuff, right? So as far as, to that unbelted fighter that feels like their dream may be slipping away, I'd have to say only if you let it. It would be really easy right now to say there's no point in doing any of this because COVID, right? It's much harder for you to say, well, we don't have COVID. What else do we have? And what work am I willing to do in the meantime? And how much work can I get done while we're off the field? So, Timmur.
All right, cool. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more to that. Yeah, at this particular time, the martial community as a whole, we're not able to engage in our art, whether it's on the armored side or the rapier side or the cut and sew side. We just can't do it for obvious reasons. We might be able to do a small pocket if you happen to be fortunate enough to be quarantined with someone, and if they don't have a concussion, that is. But along those lines, there's a couple things that, because this is something that I'm talking to a few people about, and they're like, oh man, I feel like my dream's slipping away. What can I do? How can I? I'm like, well, what I've been doing for the last little while, one, like Sean says, it's tedious. Are you doing your Pell work? Are you keeping your physicality up? Because when this thing switches, are you going to be that guy or that person that's going to be running to catch up with everyone, or are you going to be already in the pack? Second, how's your gear looking? Right now, this is the time to make the garb, the fighting garb, the non-fighting garb, take that opportunity to create. Because how many times we've been like, oh man, my gear looks like crap and I don't have time to do it. Well, now's the time, get that buffing wheel out, mail your helmet to your friend. Do those things that we need to do that we don't normally have time to do. Usually, and Sean and I tease Sean about it, but usually we run our gear into the ground. They're like, wow, now that our gear is more strapping tape and duct tape, I guess it's time to take a couple weeks off to repair it. Well, now's the time to find that garb, that fighting thing that you've wanted to do, and actually just do it. If you don't know how to do it, like Sean said, there's plenty of things online where you can find the means, you can find the ability to do it, and figure it out. Another thing too, and this is going to sound really corny, but as far as what's kind of kept me inspired is reading, and on occasionally watching some, what I consider epic movies. Kingdom of Heaven's on the top of that movie list. The Tolkien trilogy, including The Hobbit #4, is the top of that book read. Being able to find out those books that when I was a kid, I was able to read and dig into. It's like, oh yeah, this is the knight I want to be, or this fighter I want to be, or this is how I want to represent. It kind of keeps my soul filled. And I think for that, and as silly as that is, it's that reminder. When I started this and started down this path, this is the place I wanted to go. Well, now that I'm stagnant for obvious reasons, let's go back to that well. Oh, look, it's still there. Crack open that book, read a little bit. Go online, take on a class, make some garb, learn how to make garb. All those things. When I talked to Sean earlier today, we were going like, is this a garb, non-garb things? He's like, oh, it's a garb thing. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Ironically, I found the first tunic I ever made like a bajillion years ago, and I was almost tempted to wear that POS, but but yeah, just find those things to keep you afloat mentally. Keep in contact with the people you need to. Some people are fortunate to have a small family that they are with. Other, like one of my provosts got a hold of me recently, and she's like, hey, I'm floundering. I'm like, great, let's talk, let's do this. And just that reach out, quick touch, bang, we're solid. Trying to figure out what we can do to keep this individual motivated on their path, and we found a way to do that. So reach out to your extended family, because we're here. Just do it. All right, this is my short version.
And Timmur mentioned his provost, and I think it's fair to point out at this point that Timmur is also a member of the Order of Defense.
There's that.
Awesome.
3 peerages.
Fantastic questions. Fantastic answers, gentlemen. So with that, I have a little follow-up question before we get to our wonderful audience questions. And the follow-up question is, what are you doing to improve your SCA experience right now? Are you working on new kit? Are you, getting a new helmet, making new garb, whatever? I know I went through and replaced all of the straps on that were like kind of dodgy on my armor, because I figured when we get back to the field, if I go out there and I have a broken strap, I deserve to get beat up for not taking this time at least to replace a couple of straps.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Timmur.
All right. So what I've been doing. So as Tiana would say, quarantining with me has been very entertaining, and my Pell will probably, by the time this quarantine's over, probably need to be replaced, because it's actually it's where the headshot is actually forming an hourglass shape. I should take a picture of it and send it to you. It's kind of cool. So I've been doing a lot of Pell work. I've also managed to keep the cardio up. It isn't the 14 to 15 hours I used to do. It's more like 2 to 3 hours, but I'm still trying to do some kind of cardio. That way I don't look like a total lump. I've also turned my backyard into an archery range. That's been kind of fun to do. and also on the upkeep of all my gear, all of it. And it's really frustrating. And Sean can attest to this because I don't have access to. Okay, there's a long story here, but I am not an artistic person and the least bit. I discovered that I am a person that can delegate like no one's business. And usually I can delegate my help in certain aspects to my gear when it gets fractured to people like Richard and Bartholomew Hightower. And yeah, Jason, not right now. So I've learned how to, no one will believe it. I'm going to say it out loud. No one's going to believe it. I've learned how to take care of my own stuff. So yeah. um, sewing my own, sewing, I've been able to sew for a while. My knight informed me when I was younger that you have one of two choices. You're either going to learn to buy stuff or make stuff. Pick one. Poor college kid. Sewing. Oh, you know what? I actually like sewing. In fact, I'm starting an outfit for one of my squires in the near future. We went and bought her some stuff, and I'm going to be doing that just because she's coming back. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. It's just small little projects to keep things up. Been able to do some tell work. Been able to do in where we live at mundanely. COVID crept in just like did the rest of us, and so at the beginning it was like quarantine, then quarantine more and more, and the more that we were exposed to it, the more it's like, okay, you've been voted off the island, you've been voted off the island. I have a very small island now, but it's been fun up until it's not true. It's still fun. So it's been great being able to get together, being able to fix my own gear. Big Ran, you'd be proud too. So.
Excellent. You're great, Sean.
When this whole thing started and it looked like it was, when our kids got pulled out of school and it was like, oh, you're going to be out of school for 30 days. And then it's like, oh, you're going to be out of school until the middle of April. And then it's like, oh, okay, the rest of the school year is going to be online. And, when it first comes up, you think that it's, that it's going to be a short-term thing. I was, all gangbusters and gung ho and getting things done around the house and, doing some work on the basement. And, pretty quickly my YouTube channel turned from a fighting channel to a sewing channel. I had a couple of classes that I did on like how to do a fitting for a Gothic fitted dress, how to do a box and tunic, that sort of stuff. Next weekend, I'm actually doing a class for tips and tricks on some sewing stuff with one of our newer laurels. So early on, like spring was like, it's like, well, we don't know how long we're going to be able to do this, and like I have all this time to do stuff, so I'm going to get some of this stuff done. And then that tapered off. Summer and fall in particular. Man, things really, really kind of tapered off. So, I haven't done nearly as much work on like my armor, and kind of getting that together. It was all in pretty good repair because we just come back from Australia and I wanted to make sure everything was ready to go before Australia anyway. So I haven't really used it since then. So my armor's in pretty good repair, although there's some things I can definitely do, but, there had been some sewing, going on and, otherwise, one of the big things that I've been doing is as I'm sure everybody knows at this point, is been involved with the SCA Coaches Corner since April, and and that was something that we'd actually started a year like November 2019. Me and Tristan and Branos had already been talking about that, and then the pandemic just kind of gave us a okay, well, fuck it, here we go. Because and I think some of it was like we wanted to do this thing and kind of talking about the best way to approach it and this, that, and the other thing. And then when the pandemic happened and there was just an opportunity where like just do a show, just launch. I'd seen some comments by some of our other content creators out there. Somebody's like, well, if you want to do a show, what's the best way to do that? And you're like, just do it, like just jump. Like whatever idea you think you have, just do it. Because there's so much SCA content out there right now, but there's so much. There's something for everybody. right? It's not all just fighting stuff. There's all sorts of stuff that's out there that there's something for everybody. And I'm a big believer that in this period that we're in, that more SEA content is better. That more like somebody is going to find a niche, somebody's going to find something, and again, online SEA is not better. This is not better than being at events, but it's better than not being at events. It's better than nothing. And what these shows like yours, Ask the Knights Live, Between Two Peers, the Sisters Interview Network with the Murder of Dukes interviews, the Branch of Laurels, the Sisters interviews, Grace Under Pressure, all of that stuff is keeping us connected. So Coach's Corner is something that I've been doing, and being able to work with the coaches that we have, Branos and Thorfinn and Nocta and Tristan and Ilyahu and Sagan and Ron Valder, and being able to take that collection of information and get that out to people to make them better trainers, to change the way that we teach our sport. I guess if there was something I could say that I'm doing during pandemic, that would be it. And and then there's Calvar's Corner, got a series going on over there too. So.
Absolutely awesome. And like that's the thing too. You guys were talking about, like you do a lot of stuff, but then sometimes you don't do a lot of stuff, and that's okay too. You know what I mean? There's so much going on in the world today. Hell, the last 24 hours is proof of that. That things can go pear-shaped in a moment, but like you said, Your Grace, this is better than nothing at all.
And a good friend of mine recently said, early in the pandemic, it just kind of mentioned that it's like, oh, I know there's all these shows going on and these things I want to watch, but it's like I just don't have it in me or whatever. And the thing that we had agreed on at the time was like, we don't know how long this is going to go on. Even now that there's a vaccine coming, we don't know how long this is going to go on. Right. Mm-hmm. This is, you don't flip a switch and turn this thing off. Right.
Right.
So the thing that I've been telling people for this whole time was, do what you have the capacity to do.
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry about whether or not you're doing enough. Don't worry about whether or not you're doing as much as I'm doing, right? I mean, we do the Coach's Corner every Friday night, right before Between Two Peers, but we've got enough of us in there that we can take a break.
Yeah.
Julia and Helga haven't had that. They had to create that. They had to add guest hosts, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've been at this for a long time, as long as we have, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot. Don't feel like you have to do all that. Do what you have the capacity to do, right? And even if that just means putting this on in the background and listening to us talk about these things so that you feel some sort of connection. You don't have to just, do the dishes while you're listening to us, right?
Yeah.
If you feel like you have to do all this stuff at home, do that. Do what you have the capacity to do.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny you should phrase it that way, Sean, because I was taking the context of like, we've actually had this conversation with people who are on the path of whatever periods you're looking for. It's like we've had that conversation of people like, well, I can't do everything blah, blah, blah does. I'm like, well, then don't. Do what you can along that pathway. So it's ironic that you should bring that up when we talk to people and have these conversations. And I say you and I should have these conversations with people being like, no, do what you can do to keep that going, to keep that spark alive. Just because person XYZ is gung-ho, knows everything, doesn't mean that's the kind of member of the inner order here that you want to be a part of. You don't have to be that guy. Be your guy. Be the person you are. So no, that's really cool. Ironic too.
100%. All right, gents. So now comes the more interesting part of the show after we get rid of all of my boring ass questions.
I mean, so far so
good. I'm glad you're having a good time. But we get to the more interesting questions, which always come from my audience. I don't know why, but they're the ones who keep the show afloat. So without further ado, our first audience question is from Sir Eva down in Loach, Claudia Linder. What is your
I'm a big,
favorite
I'm a
nightly
big fan of Robert.
tradition in your kingdom? Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, what is your favorite nightly tradition in your kingdom?
I mean, Timmur knows where I'm going.
Yeah, actually,
It's probably the same.
it's mine. It's the same one. Dude, this one's yours. This one's all yours because it's the part that
It's
just like,
it's
ooh,
born on the list field.
yeah.
So we had oh my god, this is probably gonna be
Decker.
kind of we had one of our knights in our kingdom pass away a couple of weeks ago. Sir Decker Hawkswood, who was one of my squire brothers, was squire to Brian Tarragon. Um, Decker had a gift for the bard. He would always sing. The story goes, or at least the first part of the story goes, um, they were at Penzic, and Duchess Anna, who may have been queen at the time, had heard "Born on the Listfield," and uh, she told Decker, um, "You need to learn that song for me. I don't care what you have to do. You need to learn that song for me." Of course, at the time, it was passed down as an oral tradition,
Mhm.
so you were not allowed to write down the words. You had to have somebody teach it to you through oral tradition, right? She says, "You got to learn that song for me." So Decker got a hold of Master Ivar Battlescald, who wrote the song, and it was voice recordings over like phone voice tape things that long ago, and he learned it, and he sang. He sang that. He learned it for Anna. He sang that for her. And when Decker was knighted, as an Aidenvelt knight, one of the last Aidenvelt knights of the kingdom, really, before we became a kingdom. Decker sang "Born on the Listfield" at his own knighting. And then when we became a kingdom, Decker's best friend, Conrad von Trichten, now Duke Order the Laurel, Order the Pelican, Sir. Conrad von Trichten was the first knight of our kingdom. And Decker sang "Born on the Listfield" at his knighting. And it was very touching. I'm sure most people are familiar with the song, but it is very powerful and it's very touching. Decker sang it for his best friend, for Conrad, our first night, and he had sung it for several after that, and then kind of stopped playing a little bit, or wasn't playing as much. And so there were a couple of nightings where it didn't happen, and I asked Decker to teach me "Born on the Listfield" so that we could have that song at our nightings. And so Decker taught me the song. The first person I sang it for was Count Dahoud Aldamashki, who's a good friend of mine. And so I certainly did not start the tradition, but when Decker had kind of wasn't playing as much, I definitely picked that up and continued that. But it's something that we do as once the new knight has been passed off to greet his order, we sing that song, and the kingdom sings with us, and it's something we do that is unique. And curiously enough, in Timmur's last reign, we made the first Master at Arms in our kingdom, Master Kadu, and we had a couple of knights present for that, including a couple of masters, including Master Corwin, who's Logan, you know Corwin out in the west.
I do.
So Corwin grew up in Anstiora, where Ivar Battlescald was from. And when I sang "Born on the Listfield" for Kaduv, I made no effort to change knight to master. And that was done intentionally. The reason for that is, and I know this is kind of a lengthy answer to this, but I'm kind of passionate about this, I guess.
What we're here for.
The reason that I made no effort to change the phrasing from a knight to a master was Ivar Battlescald was a master at arms, and the urban legend goes that Ivar had made a comment about chivalry, knightliness, fealty, whatever. And somebody had told him, what could you possibly know about knighthood? You're not in fealty, you're not a master, or you're a master, right? His response to that question was Born on the Listfield. And so I felt singing that for the first Master at Arms that was made in our kingdom, I thought it was overwhelmingly appropriate to leave the phrasing precisely as it was, because that's the way it was written by Master Ivar. So that is absolutely my favorite tradition.
That was an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Your Grace Timmur, is there another tradition, or do we want to just call
honestly, okay, so I'm going to add what Sean had said, because like Sean said, it starts with one voice, usually Sean's if he's present, and then the members of the chivalry chime in. Then the populace chimes in, and it is from a certain aspect, the whole kingdom at that very moment is focused on the beauty and the pageantry of the elevation of this one person. So it is just that it hits you in the heart and it hits you in the soul, because it is very, very strong and very passionate. One of the most passionate things I've ever heard was the populace. The singing of that song by the populace is earth-shattering. It is just absolutely intense and it's beautiful, because it is the acceptance of that person to the order that no one else, none of the other orders have, and it is amazing. All right, next question.
Awesome. All right. So this next question comes from Jeanette. And the question is, in brief, what advice do you have for a rapier or cut and thrust fighter who is trying to get into heavy fighting for the first time? Your Great Timmur, I think this one is for you.
Okay.
I will have some thoughts, but I'm going to let Timmur take this one.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Ironically, I get asked this question quite a bit. You know, what do we need to do? Which direction do we need to go with? If I'm here, what does it take to get to there? And on both sides of the coin. First things first, whichever one that you're initially at, be confident in that level of expertise. When you start in the SCA, and I've seen this a lot in my local practices, where you have some newer people come in, they're like, "Ooh, I want to do the hard suit stuff," or "Ooh, I want to do the rapier stuff," or "Ooh, I want to do the cut and thrust stuff." You know what? Figure out the niche you want first. The rest of it's still going to be there, but figure out that one niche that you want to be first, and get really good at it. Not to the point of where you're, a knight level or a master level, but get really, really good at it. Reasoning that you want to be able to keep that skill set, and then when you start branching out to the other one, you don't have to lose what you've already learned, because it's already ingrained so heavily. There is a fighter in our group. His name's Jaeger. He started out quite a few years ago, and he's like, "Okay, I want to do this. I want to do that." And he started bouncing back and forth between the two. Great. And he's like, "Timmur, what should I do?" I'm like, "Pick one." "What?" I'm like, "Pick one. Get really good at it, and then let's have this conversation in a year or so." And he's like, "Okay." And he's turned into a really, really up and coming hot rapier fighter. And he's like, "Okay, now I think I'm ready." I'm like, "Yeah, you actually are. Let's get on. Let's get starting on this." Now that's the back work. Now let's look at the what translates, because for me, hey Sean, fighting is fighting is fighting. There's certain aspects that don't change. Target recognition, shot selection, execution, recovery. These are all things that translate over, whether it's a broadsword, a rapier, a spear, all that translates over and can translate over. And so what you need to do is figure out how you can translate that over. When I approach, in my current fighting style on the armored combatant side, when I approach a glaive fighter, I take a very fabric stance. If it's a great sword or a glaive, flip it over. When I am on the rapier side, I will throw a wrap shot. Granted, I will stop for impact and turn it into a draw cut. Draw cuts are legal in our kingdom. So there are aspects that can and will translate over. There are aspects that don't translate over. If you think that just tapping people is going to be okay on the armored side, obviously you're in for a rude awakening. If you think hitting your opponent super hard on the rapier side, they're not going to want you back. So there are obviously things that don't translate over. But step one, get good at that one specific sport. Step two, be comfortable enough to go through the second one. And and step three, this one's my favorite one. Prepare to suck. Because when I started rapier, I was athletic on the armored side. Man, it was such a train wreck. The rapier fighters in Lost Fallen bless their soul because they were so patient. When I figured out my calibration and figured out everything, I sucked so bad, and it was a real, what's that H word? Humbling experience. But, yeah.
Stick to what you know, Timmur.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the Raven knows it. So that's my short version. I can go way on that one because it's something that obviously I'm passionate about. But that's where I'd start with is pick the one, get fairly confident in it, and then go off another. And when I say pick that one, it doesn't mean stay in it for just a couple months. No, make sure that your muscle memory is locked in. Your target recognition is locked in. You know how to do that aspect of that sport before venturing to other. All right, Sean, tag.
So the one thing I will say is, as Timmur mentioned, fighting is fighting is fighting. However, heavy weapons combat seems to translate much better to rapier combat than vice versa. I think it has to do with power generation for the most part. By the time Timmur started doing rapier, he had been squired to me for a couple of years. Had a pretty solid foundation underneath him. He became our local baron. The rapier guys kind of cajoled him into, because it was an easy sell, but they asked him to. So he basically agreed to do 1 week of heavy and 1 week of rapier practice. And that was something that we talked about. And I was comfortable with where he was in his, because he was still my squire. He wasn't knighted yet. But I was comfortable with where he was in his progression, that doing the rapier stuff was not going to be a distraction. But as I think Timmur kind of alluded to, pick a thing and do the thing, find some level of proficiency in that thing before you start branching out into the others. Because a lot of the stuff that and again, a lot of stuff that translates from heavy to rapier is the footwork and the target recognition and the decision making process. And the training methodology that you use to teach either of those should be virtually identical. One of the things that we talk about on the Coach's Corner a lot is training methodology and how we learn things. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. is we're trying to change how people learn things, not what they're learning, right? Because the content is going to be different, especially in rapier combat, where you have Spanish styles and German styles and French styles and Luxembourg styles. You have all of these different styles, the Italian styles, right? You have all these different styles of fencing that whoever you're learning from is going to be teaching you a specific style, right? Or in Timmur's case, they're going to teach you how to club people with a different tool. Timur's not exactly a Fiore and
No.
Capoeira kind of fencer guy. He's more a heavy fighter that kills people with the rapier stuff. But not the guy that you want to have an in-depth discussion about which styles are from which countries. But there's a lot of that. And so the content that you're learning is going to be the same, but the training or the content is going to be different, and that's fine. But the training methodology, and that's a big change that happened in our local group with Master Elias, one of our Order of Defense. He is a teacher professionally. He teaches grade school, I think, grade school, maybe junior high. So he understands training in general.
Patience.
And he understands patience. Well, he works with Timmur, so he has to understand patience. But he started taking some of our training methods and applying that to rapier combat, and that was something that didn't really exist, at least in our barony, before Elias really kind of picked up on that. And so, coming from rapier to heavy, it doesn't translate as well as vice versa, but it is certainly doable, right? Fighting is fighting is fighting. And one of the things that I tell people all the time about starting new or starting again is you have to treat each part of the sport like you don't know anything about it, right? You have to learn. You have to learn what the system is. As Bruce Lee says, no form from form, right? You don't just say, "Oh, well, I've done rapier, so this is close enough, and I can just figure it out." You have to go and learn the heavy combat stuff as an individual entity. Then you get to apply the things that you already know from rapier and say, "Okay, that part is the same, and this other thing is the same, but the two sports are not the same," right? One of the things I love about doing rapier occasionally, I don't do it that much, but when I do, one of the really hilarious things to me is the rapier fighters don't know how good I am, and they don't know how good I'm not. They're like, "Oh my God, he's the Duke." What was that line, Timmur? There's two of them.
There's two of them. There's a story. There's an actual story there.
There's two of them. That actually happened to me in Timmur. It's like, I'm a knight, I'm a duke, I know how to hit people with weapons, right? But rapier is different, and if I'm not regularly practicing with that, the execution is going to be slightly different. But yeah, it just always freaks them out. It's like, "Oh my God, he's this big thing, and is this like that?" I'm like,
don't do that.
Okay. Oh, he fell down. Okay, cool. That's cool. But it's not. I haven't put the kind of practice into it that Timmur does, and I don't ever expect to be as good as, say, Elias or some of the others that we have here. But I can easily. It's a weapon, right? A weapon is a weapon is a weapon. I can pick it up and I can defend myself with it. I can account well
You're
for
adequate.
myself.
You're adequate.
Let's not go that far. I mean, I haven't put that much work into it yet.
All those in TV line, take a drink.
Well, gentlemen, we're at our hour, but if you guys don't mind, I've got a couple more questions.
Oh no, we're used to this.
All right, excellent. We've got some time. So I've got one more question from the audience that I definitely want to get to, and then there's one more question from me. But let's do the audience question first because, like I said, they're always more interesting. Okay, so this one comes from Holland Cooley. It says, "Did you have to intentionally develop a mental game for tournaments, or did it develop along with your prowess?" Your Grace Timmur, I think you should answer this.
Did I have to develop a mental game for the tournament? It came along the way, but what came also is the trigger. So the tournament fight was one of those things where for me it was a developmental, and obviously Sean was there from the beginning and the get go. But then came the trigger. And by the trigger, everyone has a different trigger. Some people might not even have a trigger, but for me, the trigger is the salute, because that's when the fight starts. That is just like in martial arts with a bow. The salute, you salute your consort, you salute the crown, you salute your most noble opponent. And for me, that's the mental trigger. That's the point where it's time to go. I mentioned earlier in the interview, we talked about when the war melts away. For me, when that happens, when that takes place, that salute, that's the trigger, and that's the moment it goes. Um, it was there for quite a while. I didn't realize it was there, but it was pointed out to me by my squire brother Michael, um, who is probably one of the most talented martial artists I've come across, period, and a sentence.
One of the most complete
I
fighters you'll
refer,
ever meet.
yeah, I refer to him as the monster of Artemisia because he is down insanely good, and he's an even better teacher. But he pointed it out. He pointed out, he's like, you realize that the reason why you do this is because of your martial arts background. And I didn't even put one and one together to make 5 million, but he's like, right. So that the mental game for it was always there, but finding that trigger, finding that moment where you're out to engage in combat. It's not necessarily the getting over the tourney head thing. I mean, there's still plenty of boogeymen for me out there, but that's when I realized that no matter what happens, win, lose, embarrassment, yay embarrassment. Everyone has those moments. I have so many. But that's when that moment happens when you salute your opponent, and for me that's the trigger. That's the trigger, and it doesn't matter if it's at a tournament, if it's crown tourney, or if it's at a fighter practice. I start and end every one of my fights with that salute. Sean and I are in the backyard. We smack each other around. He tags me. Salute him. Round 2. Salute him. Round 5 million. We're still saluting each other because we know at that particular point the fight starts. Now, practice is a little bit different because we salute, we fight. You see what I did there? This is why I killed you. Okay, cool. Salute and then fight. And that's the beginning, the end of the chapter. Tournaments, that's for me, that is definitely the go time. That's when the world melts away, and that's it. It's just me and nobody else. Sean?
So I guess the short answer is yes. See, the problem with having tournament early on, or the problem with having skill early on, is you tend to think that that's enough. That you can just rely on just being good, right? And being, I'm just going to be better than everybody else, right? But the mental part is a huge part of our game. In fact, I mean, I'm constantly saying, as with many other martial arts, what we do is no less than 80% mental. And it's about 20% physical at the highest executions of our sport. In the beginning, those numbers are reversed. It's about 80% physical, where you're trying to figure out what stick mechanics are and how your body moves and how your feet move underneath you when you're trying to do stick mechanics. So there's a lot of physical stuff you have to figure out to begin with. But at the highest executions of our sport, it's at least 80% mental, which is partially why you see a lot of guys that were hot sticks in their 20s or hot sticks in their 50s, because we keep getting smarter about the fight. I mean, it's the same reason that Bruce Lee's not going to fuck with Ip Man, right? I mean, that was his master. If you've seen a picture of the two of them standing next to each other, Ip Man is this tiny little, like Gandhi looking guy, I mean, it's the classic, well, first thing I'm gonna do is just go out and whoop this old man's ass. And then when that doesn't happen, we get smarter about our sport as we go on, or we should, hopefully. So, but in the beginning, it's talent, right? You rely so much on talent. So for me, the big thing for me was I went in the military at 18, came back, and I had some success prior to that. And so when I got home out of the military, I'm like, okay, so now we just roll right in and win crown because that's what you do, right? That's how this works. And when that did not happen immediately, in every royal list that I entered, crown list, coronet list, there was always like I was beating myself up about it pretty bad. And there was always this lingering thing that says, coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? If I hadn't gone in the Navy, then I could have been this big thing. I could have won crown already. I could have been a contender, right? All these things, right? And you get to thinking that I wasted all this time, and I could have done this, and I could have done this, and it's just really super super toxic death spiral mind trap to get into. And the day that I was able to get past all of that bullshit was in fact the day that I won Coronet list for Artemisia. And it was, I just had to come to the realization that this is going to happen, right? I'm going to win Coronet list as long as there are Coronet lists. And as it turned out, I was the second to last. So, just had that opportunity where I'd fought in a couple of Coronet lists before that. And didn't win, and shredded myself about what a terrible person I am. Like character assault, right? Like, not that I wasn't good enough today. It was like I must be a bad person because I didn't win, right?
Yeah.
And that I think was the beginnings of victory conditions for me, and which has become kind of a hallmark of my teachings, is redefining your victory conditions. Because I had to get past that. I had to get over that, and it was hard. Man, it's hard because it was like I was this big thing, and I should just immediately come back after. I mean, shit, I was in Korea for 2 years before I came back. And I didn't fight while I was there at all because the practice wasn't convenient. So I didn't fight there at all. So I come off of 2 years of layoff and expect I'm just going to roll in and just like be everything that I was and more, and just win crown just like that, right? How hard can it be?
Right.
It was hard. It was a hard lesson for me to learn. But once I got over that, once I realized that the time that I spent in the military, in a lot of ways, made me much more of a decent human being than I could have been without it. And realized the value of the time that I spent there, finding myself and making mistakes there, and having that time. Once I was able to get over that, I've really never looked back. Because that has been an absolute hallmark of everything I do in the list. Is I just have faith in it's going to happen. It's like I'm going to win crown at some point. And even if I've laid off of crown for, I think the biggest break between our last ones was like 6 years, from crown to crown. And at that point I was able to just get enter because it's fun, and if I win, then I'll do the job. But that was something I had to work through. And it was hard. I was young. I was still in my 20s, and I was beating myself up every time. So that was definitely something that I had to learn. And it's partially I had to learn it the hard way because I'm a kinesthetic learner, and I had to learn it because the talent came easy to me, and I had the talent, and the victories, the body count wasn't lining up with what I thought my talent was. And so, yeah, I definitely had to learn that mental part.
Excellent.
Can I add one thing about Sean and his victory condition?
Sure.
Just a little quick one, and this is more of a comical note. So, Sean, my incredible knight, taught me many, many things. Back in the early days of our kingdom, we had the traditional list. I refer to it as you pick your poison list. Whereas the unbelt, you went and ask the member that, yeah, Sean knows where I'm going with this. You go ahead and ask the member who you can to fight. That way you know who your executioner is going to be. Well, at the time, young up and coming squire, I always try to find a knight outside of our area, outside of our area that I don't get a chance to meet or fight with on a regular basis. That way I can get my ass kicked by someone different, not just Greg or Floki, or one of the local guys. So Sean's first time hosting Crown as king, I picked my poison. I picked the Omega Prince, last Prince of our kingdom, Gareth. And Sean has taught me many, many things. He taught me how to like someone. I managed to like Gareth. That was kind of cool. Sean never taught me just what you do when you win. There was, I liked Gareth, and then I managed to land a stick on him, and then Gareth does this weird thing that I've never seen Gareth do before, and he fell over, and I'm like, I literally, if you look at my face, Sean, what do I do? What? I literally looked down at Gareth, looked up at Sean, and she looked at it like, you got to be out of your goddamn mind face. And like, you salute your opponent, and you walk away. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. So,
yes, I realize we haven't covered victory to this point, so maybe we'll cover actually winning fights. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, it's like what do you do when you actually win one of these things? I don't know.
I guess we'll talk about that when it happens. Oh, here we are.
Too late. Okay, gents, I've got one more quick question before we get out of here. And that is from me. So, if you got a chance or if you wanted to, what would be your next weapon arts form, SCA weapon arts form that you would learn? Archery, thrown weapons, siege weapons. What would you want to do?
I think Timmur is disqualified from this question.
Okay, Sean, why is this also the next question?
I think Timmur is pretty much disqualified from this question.
Do you do everything? You do everything.
So after Timmur won 2 crowns with a center grip oval, he decided that was boring, and so he switched up to the Madu, and he's won X number of crowns with the spear like Madu-ishi sort of thing. Started doing the rapier thing before he was knighted as master of defense. Timmur's been doing archery for a number of years. He's got his set up an archery field in his backyard to do that. So, I think Timmur is disqualified from this question because the answer there is yes. And well, I wouldn't say done, but work in progress. He's really picked up a lot of things, and a lot of that has been, I think, very similar to how he got into the rapier in the first place. Because again, he was our local baron, and the rapier community was, basically called him out and asked for a little support. And Timmur said, yeah, I'll do that. And that's kind of how he ends up into these things. Not quite on a dare or a bet, but that's how he.
That's not true. That's not true. It's totally. Hey, Timmur, guess what you're doing?
Exactly. So for me, as far as if you're talking about non-fighting stuff that we're gonna get into, as my good friend Fiametta just said, first off, it'll be the art of the needle. I have been I've done quite a bit of costuming. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that I'm known for is doing a fitting for 14th century Gothic fitted dress, the self-supporting kirtle. One of the things I love about doing that, especially in an age of body image issues, I feel very fortunate that I've developed a skill set that allows me to give a woman the pattern for a dress that she feels good in.
Right.
That makes her feel sexy. Whatever body shape they may have, I can give them a pattern that makes them feel good. And that's really important to me. It's a skill set that I'm very fortunate to have developed with the help of a lot of people, most notably Countess Mariana, originally from Aidenveld, now in Outlands. She's the one that taught me that costuming method. And I've made literally dozens of those, and I've taught people how to do those. And I've been studying the Buxton tunic, which is a 14th century find that Logan may possibly have seen in person. You ever been to the Burberry Museum?
Yeah, I may have a reproduction of that I wear every once in a while. It's all wool, so it's really like only for super cold stuff. And I
Yeah.
live out here in California, so
Well,
of
and
course,
when you were in Drachenwald, if you made it up to Sweden, you might have gone to the Varberg Museum and actually seen it.
yeah, I did not get a chance to actually go to the museum and see it, but
When I,
yes,
when I get to when I
I have
finally
one
get to
right now.
Temple Wars, I'm gonna
Yes.
go. I'm gonna make some time to go see that. But yeah, it's something that I've studied extensively. And again, I'm doing a class on some tips and tricks here and there. And I've done a number of things. But yeah, so the costuming and my art is probably my next most immediate focus. And by immediate, I mean for the last 30 years or so. It's just one of those things that I've been doing for a long time because, as Timur alluded to earlier, one of the things that I remember my knight saying about being knightly, something that we discussed on the show on franchise a couple of weeks ago, let us do knightly things, right? Um,
Absolutely.
one of the things that Brian, my knight, impressed upon me early on was knights. So that's the deal. That's the deal. Knights do art. Right? Um, and Brian was a customer as well. All the ladies hated Brian because Brian Brian could take a piece of fabric and cut out his outfit. Just lay out fabric, grab a pair of scissors, and cut out the outfit, and it worked out perfectly every time. Of course, he was like that with pretty much everything that he did. But yeah, Brian was a customer, and so like early on, it's like this is where you make a tunic. Like, yes, sir, let's make a tunic. So I mean, I've been doing it, uh, for a long time. But I think that's my next focus. As far as weapons forms go, um, the rapier definitely interests me. Archery is something that definitely interests me. The reason that I don't do archery is not because I don't love it or think I would not like it. It is precisely because I know damn sure I would love it, and I have not made the time to invest in that at this point. Because again, kind of like the first question you asked about, melee versus tourney sort of thing, I'm making significant contributions in the evolution of our sport right now,
Mhm.
and I feel like that's kind of where my passion is. That's where my that's and I feel like I can do more good there for more people than I could in developing my archery skills. And the art stuff is something that I've been doing for a long time, and I've very slowly, like I said, over 30 years, kind of cultivated a certain amount of skill set. That is, it's the slow boil, the slow simmer um, on that, where I keep plugging away at that, but it's not. If I really wanted to dedicate all of my time and just drive right in and make that a passion, then yeah, I could certainly gain other recognition for my art. But I'm happy with the pace that I have on that right now, if you will.
Oh no, I totally understand. Yeah, I mean, hey, welcome to the SA, the hobby of hobbies, right? That's one of the things about this pandemic. I've picked up two more hobbies that I didn't know I needed, but apparently I
What'd you pick
did.
up?
So,
What'd you pick up?
bone carving and jewelry making, which
Damn.
is yeah, and I tell you, it's been a blast. I've learned a lot, and I really have been enjoying it. And it's allowed me to make a couple of cool gifts for people. Um, but yeah, welcome to
Yeah,
the.
Anton taught me how to do brass etching over the internet, and one of the things that he really impressed upon me that he said that I just really love it is it's really cool being able to make neat shit for your friends.
Exactly that. Exactly.
Okay. Actually, there is one thing I really want to get into, but I need to stop traveling for a long time frame because it does take a little bit more time than I'm willing to commit at this particular time. And a few years ago, there were a couple falconers in the barony. That's something
Mm.
I'd like to get into.
Oh yeah.
It's a matter of time, being able to dedicate the time. And I know I don't have that. And more importantly, I actually like my dog, and I don't want him to be eaten. So,
Because that is
but
definitely
yeah.
Falcon's neck.
Oh goodness, gentlemen. Before we end this fantastic evening, I want to say thank you first of all, and before we get out of here, do you have anything to plug? I mean, of course you've got stuff to plug. So this is the time in the show where you do it. What have you been listening to, watching, reading that you would suggest for other folks? To keep them going, keep that little spark alive, their SCA spark. Go for it. Who wants to go?
Go.
Well, I've got plenty, so I'm gonna let you go. You'll be brief.
Just to keep that, so just to keep that spark alive. Honestly, stay in touch, stay in contact, have fun, find a way to have fun. For me, it really has been and with the with the with the advent and the eventuality of the vaccine coming out, I'm plotting a lot of traveling. Unfortunately, the vaccine didn't come nearly quick enough to go visit my sister in Ireland. I'll get here, but for right now, just have as much fun as you can. There's going to be that time when we're not going to have the free time. So for right now, enjoy free time. Find that book and go have fun. Connect to people that you need to. In fact, that reminds me, I need to connect someone to Sven, and you are not any of them in the near future. One of my Aussie buddies needed to get a hold of him. But yeah, that's it. Just go have fun. Sean, go.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, the internet content that is available out right now is just is awe-inspiring, and I mean that in the most literal ways. It's just been really fantastic. Um, this show, Between Two Peers, uh, all the sisters interview stuff, the stuff we're doing over on Coach's Corner, stuff we're doing on Calorit's Corner. I'm doing a series over there on what it takes to become a knight. And we kind of intentionally set that up so that it is everything but the fighting parts. And that is actually this coming Sunday, is a new episode of that, 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Mountain. And that's one we've been having a lot of fun with. We've got some really great guests on there, and it's been a really great conversation. Because there's a lot of stuff out there on how to fight, how to get good, how to fight better, and all that. But I think kind of what you're doing here with Ask the Knights, some of the questions that come up, or some of the questions that we're addressing on our show, and we've got some really amazing guests that are joining us for that as well. But there's like I said, the SCA content that is out there is, first off, my hats off to yourself and Cal and Helga and Tulia and the others, and all the behind the scenes folks who are doing so much work to keep us all connected at a time that is crucial, I think, to the society, because without a lot of this connectivity, without these shows, it'd be really easy for people to just kind of forget the value of what we do, which ultimately, when you get right down to it, it's the people. And so until we can be together collectively, safely, keep watching the shows, and there is a show out there for you. There is definitely something out there that will be of interest to pretty much anybody in society, and they're not all just fighting shows. So yeah, lots of it, all of it. Watch all the shows.
One last thing. I gotta steal, and I'm stealing this from Joel. Joel, this is for you, buddy. For everyone out there, I know it's gonna sound dumb, but if you can, keep your membership going. Renew it for a couple years. We will come back to play, but regardless of what happens, there's still an overhead that we as a society need to pay. So, keep your memberships coming in. All right, that's it. I'm done.
And so,
Understood.
Logan, question for you.
Sure.
In the Ask the Knights tradition. So, what is besides Ask the Knights Live? What is your favorite online SEA show, and why is it the Coach's Corner?
It's funny you should ask that, and I'll tell you why. Absolutely, Coach's Corner is actually one of my favorite shows to watch because of the variety of guests and the variety of information that comes out of it. Like I I I I love watching or getting the different takes, the different views from different fighters on everything from your armor to how to throw the perfect flat snap. Like just those little things. I like the variety of that show. Um, and speaking of other shows, um, I always have to give my shout out to my sibling show, Between Two Peers, of course.
One of my favorites.
Oh yeah, those
Like,
fantastic movies will be on
we
tomorrow
get
night
done with
at
the
7.
Coach's Corner and then put on the B2P.
Exactly. So, and if you're going, I mean, it's Friday night, it's a pandemic, you're going to stay in anyway. Why not watch Coach's Corner? And then after you get all like ready to fight and everything after watching Coach's Corner, then you can slip into Between Two Peers and have a few laughs and relax a little bit. It's kind of like that first beer after a day on the warfield, right?
It's an evening of wholesome entertainment.
Yeah, that's what I said.
But, but sometimes I have to send my 12-year-old daughter to bed right when they get started on that.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, 100%.
Hey, Sean,
So
you know what day is today, right, Sean?
Today,
Yeah,
Thursday.
it's Eleanor's birthday. It's Eleanor's
Oh
birthday.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to my man at
Yeah.
arms out
Happy
there
birthday,
in
Eleanor. Yeah.
parts east. Happy birthday.
happy birthday,
Yeah.
Eleanor. All right, folks. So I got a few more announcements here before we get done. First off, Duke Sean, you were actually talking about this a few minutes ago about Double Wars over in Sweden. Well, have I got a deal for you? Um, the West and friends are planning a trip in mass to Double Wars in 2022. It's the a tentative trip. If we can't do it in 2022 because all the craziness is still going on,
Right.
we'll to 23. But we are hopeful that we will be able to do this. And if you go onto Facebook, you can join the group. It's the West and Friends. Go to Double Wars, and I'll post a link here in the comments and on the Ask Knights page. So just go join the group, even if you don't think you'll be able to take the trip. It's got a lot of good information about international travel with your armor, and basically all the things that you need to go to this. And the fantastic folks over in Drachenwald are there to help you, right? If you need pick up at the airport, or you need a place to stay for a couple of days before the event starts, or you need someone local to help you rent a tent. Guess what? All of these fantastic people are in there and they're willing to help you. They're going to do for us what we do for them when they come over here. So, and it's a great way to meet new people, not only in Drachenwald, but in the West and from all over. We've got folks from all the kingdoms basically planning on this big turnout. So if you're interested in Double Wars, if you don't know what Double Wars is, you need to go to the Drachenwald page and look it up, or just Google it. Double Wars.
It's on my to-do list for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no time to start getting ready for it like the present.
Exactly.
Right. All right. So I'll shut up about that. The other thing is, you guys who are usual viewers may have noticed a few changes around the Acidites Live studio, and that all is thanks to our good friend Calvert. Without him, we would not have all these cool transitions and cool little buttons and intros and outros and all this cool stuff. So I wanted to thank Calvert especially for helping us out, and of course Sir Helga for helping, or I'm sorry, Duchess Helga for helping us out with some of the artwork. Well, with most of the artwork. So all of the banners that you see at the beginning of the shows, that's all her. She does all of those awesome banners and some of the other artwork around here. So I just wanted to thank all of you folks who out there who support me, including you, the viewers, because without you, we ain't got no show, right? So thank you once again, gentlemen, for being on the show. Thank you all for watching. And hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Brown. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thanks.